Who is Igon?
Curse you, Bayle!
Igon is one of the standout NPCs of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, mainly due to an absolutely iconic line delivery, and he's only in the DLC for a short period, but is an absolute heat check in every scene and in every line read. We know he is a Drake warrior from his dialogue, from speaking to Florisax, and many different item and weapon descriptions. We know he was a man searching for a purpose until he found Dragon Communion. He then used this and eventually found his way to Bayle. And I like to think that he was just launched clean off the top of Jagged Peak to where we first found him, surviving purely on a hatred of Bayle and a multitude of broken bones. But who is Igon really? Who was he before we find him battered and broken? Before he gives us his finger and helps us defeat Bayle? Who was he before he was a Drake warrior? I did a little deeper dive, and I think I have some answers. Let's take a look at the description in his armor first. Armor of the broken Drake warrior Igon. From a set comprised of a miscellany of parts, filthy belongings are attached to this tattered piece of protective wear. The poor scavenger of battlefields found honor through Dragon Communion. Now, each set of his armor has something similar, kind of regarding Dragon Communion, but has this like a tad little difference in its total description. His gauntlets and his loincloth both state that they were stripped from a corpse found in the aftermath of a battle. His helmet says a little bit more, and it said this tattered protective wear is shaped like a bugle. There are a couple of things to pay attention to here. Kind of each description implies that he has built his armor up through multiple parts, looted through all these old battlefields for different things. But I really want you to pay attention to the description of his helmet being shaped like a bugle, as I think this will be more important as we move along. Now, in the lore of the base game, we have descriptions of an enemy type that work to scavenge battlefields. So let's take a quick look at the description for the Vulgar Militiamen armor set. Armor worn by lean, mean, and filthy militiamen. Freshly singed battlegrounds effusing with the stench of the dead. Forbidden lands that will be excised from the memory of history. This is where the vulgar militia serve as untiring, unsung watchkeepers. Now, what I absolutely love about this is how it ties into Shadow of the Erdtree and Igon's story. And really how it makes it very obvious how much time and effort the team at From Software put into their games. Nobody was worried about more vulgar militiaman lore, but now here we are. As we now know where the forbidden lands that will be excised from the memory of history are. And we have a new enemy type that even further confirms this. The Shadow Militiamen. And the Shadow Militiaman armor states nearly the exact same thing, but confirms the location with the change in the final line. What better place than the realms of Shadow then for such an army? Now, I told you to pay attention before how it said Igon's helmet was shaped like a bugle. Look at the intentional shape of both the Vulgar and Shadow Militiaman helmets, and how the Vulgar Militia helm plainly states that the upward extension serves to create a larger size, and it just happens to also be in a bugle shape. I think all of these points together are too much of a coincidence to ignore. I also feel like kind of how the tattered cloth on the Vulgar Militiaman helmet resembles parts of Igon's. Now, both the Vulgar and Shadow Militiamen drop two weapons. The first being the Vulgar Militia Shotel, which states, the Vulgar Militia are the undecorated stewards of rancid, scorched battlefields that none dare approach, and forbidden domains better forgotten by the rest of the world. Again, confirming the likely origins of these people in the Shadowlands following Mesmer's conquest. And the second is the Vulgar Militia Saw. This description states, a weapon comprised of a saw blade attached to a long grip. Brandished by the Vulgar Militia, its serrated edge is very effective at inflicting blood loss. The saw is said to also be used to cut up bodies to feed the militia, but there are no first-hand witnesses to confirm the dire rumor. I believe that Igon was initially a vulgar militiaman, and the description on this saw is what initially led him to practice dragon communion after cutting up a fallen drake on the battlefield. Like many of other people have speculated that this first instance of dragon communion was almost by accident. And this ultimately led him to find his purpose and become that Drake warrior, which leads to our chance encounter in the Shadowlands. I think even more evidence to support this theory is found on Igon's armor set. Like, there are random sets of gloves attached throughout the set, and one of them appears to very closely match the look and description of the vulgar militiaman gloves. To sum it up, I believe Igon was a vulgar militiaman, and this serves as a perfect backdrop to how he would go from being a scavenger of battlefields to accidentally partaking and finding his purpose through dragon communion. But really, what are your thoughts? Do you think Igon was part of the vulgar militia, or do you think he was just a scavenger and they use these similarities to illustrate that point? Either way, I love it. FromSoft games give me so much joy in picking apart the random corners of them. I hope you all enjoyed, and let me know what else you want me to try to unpack.
Solid of scale you might be, foul dragon, but I will riddle with holes your rotten hide with a hail of harpoons, with every last drop of my being.